at that time I was with a record label called UCMG, and they were doing like dance music in general, very broad, from techno over house to drum and bass. And they brought Timo Maas, Chris Liebing, the techno and house guys, and me over. And yeah, I think that was like 15 years ago. Must have been something like that. Yeah, we stayed in Toronto and we played there. The 2 gigs.
That's awesome. You know what? I just want to let you know I did start recording because I thought that was a perfect line to start recording on. To confirm for the listeners who I have on the phone here, it is the one and only Bassface Sascha. Is it you, sir?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. How about you?
I'm doing well. And you know what? One of my listeners shouted out that I should ask this to everyone I speak to because I'm talking to people from all around the world. But where are you at this very moment?
I'm in Germany, actually, and it's a town called Mannheim where the breakbeat and drum bass scene evolved during the last, let's say, 28 years.
Wow. And where were you born then?
I was born in Hamburg, basically.
Okay.
But moved then over to Mannheim, which is more like down south. So Hamburg is in the north, and Mannheim is southwest, to be exact. And yeah, since then I lived there, and this is also the birthplace of breakbeats, I would say, Mannheim.
Well, you know what? I want to get more into that, but before we do, I want to do some fun questions and get to know you as an individual first. Is that okay?
Sure, yeah.
The thing I find most interesting about speaking to people from overseas is the cultural indifferences, sometimes the timing of things too. So I want to ask you, what's the best movie you've seen so far this year, if any?
This year? Oh, that's a good question. To be honest with you, I'm not a big movie guy. I'm not going to the movies, maybe because I've got a Beamer at home and I could just lie in bed and watch it at home. So maybe I'm a little bit late on some of the releases that's coming out.
Sure.
But I think I saw a little bit of the Avengers Endgame, and I really liked that.
That does look good, man. I'm like you. I got about 15 minutes in, saw that it was like a 3.5-hour film, and when I just can't dedicate the time right now.
That's it.
But I'm eager to go back and see it. The thing I loved most about the last Avengers film was that they gave me empathy towards the villain. You know, Thanos. You actually did feel for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, how about books? Are you into reading? Like, can you tell me what the best book you've ever read is? What's something you may suggest to the listeners?
Oh yeah, I totally like Paulo Coelho. It's a guy from Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
He's an author.
He's a self-help kind of guy, right? Like spiritual writing.
That's the one. Yeah, and he writes like some very nice books. I like the way he writes, and Paulo Coelho is the one for me, actually. I mean, he's one of my favorite writers at the moment.
And he's very spiritual. If I'm not mistaken, I put him in the lines of like a Robin Sharma or a Eckhart Tolle. These people that give very...
you can put it that way.
Right?
You can absolutely put it that way. Yeah. He's got like a higher sense of ideas when it comes to writing his books.
I respect that deeply. All right, well, let me ask you this. What was the first album you ever purchased with your own money? Go back to your childhood, please.
Yeah. The first album must have been Kraftwerk, The Robots. But I think it was Numbers or I know that The Robots was the first single I ever had in my hands when I was 7. So I was with a friend of mine, and he was a friend of my family. And he was the first DJ I ever met. And before that, I didn't even know about DJing. And I think the word DJ itself wasn't even not really invented at that time. There was just people who were like playing tracks in the club and tried to mix it together. And that was, let's go back, that was in 1977.
This is interesting to me because when I speak to a lot of junglists, a lot of them are coming from the sound system culture that bled into what we call jungle today. You are coming from a place of breakbeat, and therefore what you just said to me is very interesting of the term DJ not being introduced yet, because the sound system guys called the DJ the guy in the microphone, right? The guy in the turntables was a selector.
Like the Jamaican way. Yeah.
The Jamaican way, exactly. So it is interesting to me. What would you have called the guy in the turntables as a German person without that, West Indian Jamaican, I guess, derivative?
At that time, I would have called him disc jockey.
You would have said that. You would have said the disc jockey.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be the term, the phrase for it.
Interesting to me. Okay, what would you say then was your first experience with a rave?
The first rave, I think the first rave I played at the rave because I started DJing at a very early age, meaning I was 13 when I first played at a club. And at that time, no one really cared about how old I was because I said I was 17, getting 18, so it was all okay, but not legally. I just played there and had a gig. And so the first rave I've ever been was a rave I played myself, and I think it was Meditation. That was one of the first breakbeat drum and bass raves I've ever been.
Meditation.
Yeah, yeah.
That is an honorable first jam to have ever played. How did you get hooked up with meditation?
So I knew the guys from back in the days because they were coming to the club I was playing. The club was called Milk, and it was in Mannheim. And yeah, basically they were like just people who came to the club, clubbers, ravers, and they said, "Hey man, we want to do a party at some point." And I was like, "Yeah, if I can help you, I'd really like to help you guys." So I helped them a little bit with the bookings to get the connections because I had some connections with London people. I met like Groove Rider and all those cats like back in the days when I was going to Music House cutting some dub plates. So I knew all those people and I brought them in contact with those DJs. And from there on, we had off and they did the first party and I was invited there as a DJ to play.
Yeah, and you kind of made reference to something I want to talk a little bit more about because maybe in Europe it's as popular as people may assume it to be, but over here in North America, or even myself at least, so I'll admit my own ignorance on this, is what is Milk? Because it seems like it's a quite legendary spot.
Yeah, it is. So Milk was one of the first clubs who was very independent and we played music no one played at that time, meaning we played the first breakbeat stuff, we played house a lot, we played techno, Belgian techno, also Detroit techno, but also played Chicago house music tracks. So that was a melting point for so many music styles to evolve from that time. And it was just a little small club in the middle of Mannheim where a couple of DJs met and just played what they really, really loved.
Well, and the thing I find most interesting, like from reading the little bit that I could, is it sounds like these guys who we call our godfathers, people like Groove Rider, Fabio, um, Randall, made trips to this club and maybe borrowed sounds that they learned or heard and brought them back to London, and then they made their way overseas. Is that valid in what I'm saying?
I would say so. I mean, when I like think back, I think the first person we ever brought was Brian G. And at that time, we were mixing all the styles together. So even him, he was playing some techno tracks, but then some breakbeat tracks. It wasn't really defined at that time because the progression of, let's say, break-ish music was still going on at that time. So I think everybody borrowed sounds from the other styles. For instance, when he came over, he heard a lot of Belgium and Detroit house and techno. And I think that was also the time when that music crossed over. You could listen to some Detroit tracks who had some breakbeats, let's say styles or sounds in there, and vice versa.
Very interesting to me. Well, okay, let me ask you this then. When would you say, if you had to put a finger on it, that jungle was born?
Hmm. I don't know. For me, jungle, I don't know. It's hard to say because it's rooted so deeply into the reggae culture that I would say jungle was even there when drum and bass or breakbeat wasn't there because you can go back to the 60s and even the 50s, going back to Jamaican music, listening to kind of jungle music, which was the same thing with drums and bass in a way. So, but the actual real, let's say, for me, it maybe started, let's say, 93 when all the dark stuff went. So, first of all, it was like the happy hardcore stuff. People were celebrating that. And that it went very dark. I really remember that time. It was very, very dark music at that time. And then it evolved into the whole reggae kind of jungle thing. And I would say I would date that back, let's say 93, 94, something like that, for me, at least.
I agree. There's a question I was going to ask later, but I'll ask it now because it kind of goes to what you were just saying. What would you say is the difference between jungle and drum and bass?
For me, in jungle, the beats that were used came mostly from the rare groove and the hip hop beats, so people used that. But when drum and bass involved, people tried to use, let's say, drum machines and more digital sounds, and not so much the natural sounds coming from a real instrument.
That's an interesting explanation. I love the question because I hear so many different answers, and I always grew up with the idea.
I bet.
Well, it is. It's everybody. And you know what? When I first heard an answer from someone with your stature, if you will, someone with your background and your tenure in the scene, I was like, aha, I have the answer. I no longer have to ask the question. And then I heard through conversation other guys say things that just conflicted what I had heard. And I was like, well, hold on a second. I thought I knew the answer here. And, growing up, I always found jungle to be the more reggae sound, drum and bass being everything else. And what I was told is that jungle was actually getting a bad rep in some areas, and that they changed the name of the music just to try and draw a new crowd, or get promoters to allow them into the buildings, because if you said you were throwing a jungle party, they wouldn't let you book the venue. So they just changed the name and even started telling promoters over here, listen, don't book us as jungle artists, book us as drum and bass artists, or we're not coming. And that's what I was told was the evolution. It was almost like the people making the music responded to the cultural need to. But like I say, it's a very interesting question because it always has a different answer. One thing you said I want to touch on is the equipment people use to make the music. And you're someone who's been producing for many years. How has your equipment changed from the day you started to where we are now?
So the first ever equipment I bought was Akai 950, and that was like a mono sampler, and that was back in, let me think, I bet it was back in 1988. So I started with that, and then I had a sequencer that was Logic at that time. That was the first sequencer you could really produce on, and that made sense to me. But it was all like in numbers. There wasn't like something that went from a cursor that went from the right to the left. You had to punch in the numbers to get the arrangement. So it was kind of harder than nowadays. The sequencer looked totally different. So then I went to Cubase, because that was the first like sequencer program that I really liked. And from there I went to Logic, which I'm still using at that point, Logic 9 or 10X. But also I like to work with Studio One, because Studio One is the program I'm working with my partner, DJ Flex, and we are working on a lot of tracks on that system. But when it comes to, let's say, just audio work, like cutting vocals, I would say Pro Tools is the one for me.
Well, and you're talking a lot of sequencing, a lot of, digital hardware. Would you say that you've gone completely out of analog and fully digital?
I would say so. I mean, there was like a point where I had to switch because I was moving houses and I didn't have that much space. Nowadays it's okay, but and I had like a Mackie mixer, a 64-track Mackie mixer that was heavy. I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. So at that point, it was really easy to switch over, because Logic and Cubase gave us the tools to really work inside the computer and not outside the computer, and to work totally digital and not analog. And that must have been, let's say, I would say 98, 97, 98, around that time, when everything changed for me, going from analog to digital.
That's where I'm going to give a little producer's joke here, where you had to have Logic if you were going to use Reason. See, it's a producer's joke. Let me ask you this: do you think it's important for a producer to also be a DJ to be successful in today's industry?
Nowadays, it's a kind of a thing you have to do, but for me, not necessarily. I mean, if you're a good DJ, you not maybe you can't be a good producer, and the other way around. I think it's not necessary, but in our day and age, I would say it is in a way, because otherwise you can't compete in the market.
Well, one thing I bring up is DJs who have exclusivities to maybe producers that don't spin, because you brought up the vice versa thing, and I think that's an interesting topic because you can be a DJ and not be a producer but be successful, but can you be a producer and not be a DJ? I think if you find yourself, and I throw these names out there loosely, a Nicky Blackmarket, a Kenny Ken, and you can align yourself with them, then you can find a platform for your music, or even do something like what Pendulum did, where you team up and together as a
Yeah.
group you become a synergy, an entity as your own, but yeah, I think it's valid what you say. If you want to find individual success, it's probably best you get on the wheels.
Yeah, I mean it's a good synergy, as you said. Like you said, when you do both, and I mean, yeah, when you're a producer and you can test out the tracks, you remember, okay, the snare must be like a little bit fatter, change the frequency on this one, the sub bass is not there, or whatever. And I do that all the time, and I try to, like, remember that, go home and change in the studio in the mix, and that really helps.
Let me ask you, you just mentioned some stuff about sound that I think is very important, especially with our music, that I wonder if our systems are catering to it. What do you think? Do you think sound systems today cater to the noises and frequencies, I guess, we're trying to make with drum and bass?
Mm. Since everybody's playing MP3, and that's not really a format which is has the best quality, I would say it doesn't really matter in a way. But I mean, the sound is so on top. It's so over the top sometimes when it comes to MP3s. I mean, it's so loud. The loudness war is still going on. People don't really get it. That you totally lose your dynamic and all that. But yeah, I mean, a better sound system, of course, is very helpful if you got a track that really had a boost of bass down there. Yeah, I mean, I love good sound systems, and I think most of the clubs are equipped with the sound systems for those tracks.
Well, no, you touched on something that I think is really important right now, which is it's louder, it's not better. It's not, we're sacrificing quality for loudness.
Yeah.
And I don't know if producers are now responding to the sound system, because over here we've got pretty much stock systems. Unless you go out as a promoter and put in your own system, you're going to be dealing with a club that's got a pretty stock system. And as a result, like you say, guys will come out with their MP3 keys, pop in a 120 bit, just loud, bam. And it's like, yeah, it's loud, but where's all the different levels? Like, where's what you're talking about, all the quality in the intricacy of the layers? And yeah, I just think it's being lost over here, at least. Let me ask you.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me ask you this: what is the status of Smoking Drum recordings?
So this label is no longer in operation, but for a long time, so Smoking Drum Recordings was my label back in the days, alongside two other labels, and I started that in '94. And at some point, the company I mentioned earlier, UCMG, which was like a big company, they had like people from Sven Feth to hip hop. They were covering all the different genres, and drum and bass was just, or breakbeats, was just a small portion of that whole thing. So the company was bankrupt, not Smoking Drum, but the whole company UCMG was bankrupt at some point, and so I no longer could use that label and that name for it, and that was in 2000.
I'm sorry to hear that, but I know you've been releasing since then. So what is the name we're releasing under today?
So I got no label by my own. I'm releasing a lot of tracks in the UK, and yeah, I mean, if you want to, I can mention the labels I'm working with at the moment. But
Please.
none of them is my label. It's just like labels from other people.
No, that's fine. Please go ahead, mention labels, because I know you did work with Navigator, who's someone I had on the show recently. What was that released under?
Oh yeah. So that was a track called Sound the Alarm, and it was together with Scaramucci and Navigator. And it was the time when Navigator came back onto the scene, and I tried to help him in any way, and also the other way around. And we did a track called Sound the Alarm, and it was released in 2016 together alongside a video, and it was released on Lined Up International. That's Eric Wise's label, aka DJ Lined Up, based in New York.
Yes, I'm actually going to have Mr. Lined Up come up here in September to perform.
Wicked.
Yes, he's a very talented man, and he broadcasts.
Absolutely.
He's so many great talents like yourself. Now, is that under Bassface Sascha? Like when you produce, is that what it's under, or is that just your stage name?
Yeah, absolutely. Bassface Sascha is the name also for the tracks, as an artist, and also as a DJ. So yeah, Lined Up International is a label I'm going along with, and just preparing an EP for those guys. And also I did an EP for Serial Killers. That was last year.
Nice.
Yeah, and also working on an EP, which actually I finished today, for Low Down Deep, for Logan D. That's going to be an EP coming this year. And also working on another EP for Roughnecking, for DJ Daisy's label, including a track called Hand Me the Herb, and the vocalist is MC Spider.
Wicked.
Yeah.
And there'll be links below, as always. When I talk to these wonderful artists, I put links below so you can follow these guys on Facebook. You can get their music. I want to shout out Low Down Deep, Logan D. Someone I've been trying to get on the show since day one, and I've even interviewed his father twice, and I still can't get the guy on the show. If you could shout out to Danny and ask him to please do my show, I would love to talk to him. He's been such an inspiration for so many artists over here.
I will totally give him a shout.
Please. I think if I poke at him from enough ends, eventually they'll be like, okay, who the hell's this Canadian kid who keeps shouting at me from every corner?
But dude, I'm telling you, that guy is really hard to get on the phone, and via email is also sometimes it's pretty impossible, but then,
he's busy.
I don't know.
He's busy. I understand. And I'm sure he's
pretty busy.
And he's got many people that are trying to get a hold of him for nonsense, but like I say, if I could get a hold of him, get him on the show for 15 to 20 minutes, I'd love to share his story with my listeners.
Absolutely. I will do that.
Thank you. Let me ask you this. I guess you just kind of told us some of the things you got, but can you tell me for 2019, 2020, what's in the works from Sascha?
Okay, so the Lowdown Deep EP is coming. Like I said, the Roughnecking EP is coming. There's a remix coming on a German label. The German label is called Original Key, and that's something to look out for. It's a remix EP for a guy called Week, Veak, from France, and he had an EP, and some people are doing remixes for that EP. My remix is for a track called Kingston Town, and I think I would like to give it to you as a dub play, because if you play out, maybe you just want to listen to that, but that's one to look out for. That's a big tune, and so many people are really caning it up front, and I'm looking forward to release that on Original Key. And also there is another label from a friend of mine. He's called DJ Fine Soul, and DJ Fine Soul got a label called Revolver Sounds, and I had a 2-track EP on that this year. That was in January, and there's another EP coming up this year on that label as well. So a lot of things in the pipeline, plus some remixes also for bass layers. I remixed a track for Benny Page. The track is I think it just came out together with MC Spider. It's called Jungle Music, and I did a remix for Jungle Music, and this is also coming out this year.
That's dope, and I would love any dub play you're willing to send my way. I personally wouldn't be playing it, but I know a few DJs that would love to get their hands on it. I've been blessed by other producers, and as soon as they mention it in the podcast, I get 5 or 6 PMs like, hey man, can I get my hands on that tune? And they've got good platforms, like guys like Marcus Visionary. We throw it over to Polaris NC17. These are some of our local guys that broadcast to large ears. All right, I always end off with 2 fun questions, so please just have fun with these final questions, okay? Are you familiar with Mount Rushmore, the monument in America?
Yes, I am.
All right, so if we were to create a Mount Rushmore for jungle music, which four faces do you believe belong up there?
Randall, Brian G, Groove Rider, and Fabio.
That's awesome. That's honestly, man. That's in my opinion. That's not my four, but that's in my opinion the four that belong up there. If you were to answer it correctly, you just did it perfectly, Sascha. Thank you.
In a way, when you talk about DJing, those are the guys, I would say.
No, you definitely hit a little bit of every bit. You know, like you hit the sector of every corner of drum and bass, and you those are our godfathers. They really are.
Sure.
If you had to put 5 items in a vault that would encapsulate the rave culture, what 5 items would you put in there?
I would put a horn in it, like a. Let me think. I would put a whistle in it.
What kind of a whistle? You gave us a horn sound. Let's hear the whistle sound.
Oh, you know, like a rave whistle. I really can't do that.
Well, you know what? With the whistles, I used to do it like the way that people do their MPC pads sometimes. You know, do 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 do. Used to just try and like do like another whistle beat over top of the beat. But yes, whistles and horns. I'll give you that as 2 items. Go ahead, keep going.
And I would put in a sequencer with Massive as a plug-in onto that, because that's maybe one of the machines that changed a lot of the sound during the last couple of years.
I like it. So we got 3 items.
That's it.
No, we got to put 5. You got to put 5. 5 items.
Oh, 5? Okay.
Got 2 more.
What about a raver's hat?
A raver's hat?
You know, like people back in the days used like Kangol hats.
Oh, I used to wear Kangol, but I like the ones where they wore the visor and they'd put the piercing on the actual brim of their hat. Did you have those?
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe a beanie.
A beanie, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you wanted to throw an actual raver in there. I was like, all right, let's throw him in there. Give him some water and let him rot for 20,000 years. He's got a sequencer. Anyways, that was an awesome 5, I think we got there. No, we got one more. We need one more. One more item.
Of course. Okay, one more item. Let's put in an old VHC cassette from The Prodigy where they dance and where they perform.
Yeah. R.I.P. Keith Flynn.
Yeah.
You know what? Before we sign off, let me ask you: would you consider Prodigy drum and bass music?
Not really, but they are the foundation of what we call drum and bass and breakbeats today. I think without them, there wouldn't be that progression of sounds. And they also made the crossover from, let's say, a wide audience, and also the sounds they used. They really used like sounds from the techno scene, but also from house tracks, but also breakbeats from old hip hop tracks. So the actual idea of how to putting a track together basically came from them.
Well, and they also gave it a radio-friendly song format where sometimes drum and bass can sound, electronic can sound redundant to some people. I've had people, even when I'm at work, sometimes I go in my office and I'll leave my music playing and somebody's like, it sounds like somebody just hit the elbow on the deck and it's skipping. And I'm like, yeah, to you, I know that's what it sounds like, but Prodigy brought it out of those years. That's what I mean when I say
that. Sure.
All right, I'm going to sign off to the listeners, but I want to talk to you a little bit more, so stay on the phone with me, okay?
Of course. Yeah.
All right, guys, that was him, Bassface Sascha. As always, like I say, there will be links below, so go check the man out. And until next time, peace out.